And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. I'm honored today to have our esteemed guest, which is Dr. Alex Osterwalder. He's one of the most influential strategy and innovation experts. He's a leading author. He's an entrepreneur and an in-demand speaker. He is number 4 on the top 50 management thinkers worldwide. The list goes on and on and on in terms of the companies he's worked with:
Yeah.
Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Nestle. We don't have all that much time, but I will say his business model generation book is amazing. Here we are. So let's just dive right in and take advantage of the time we have. Alex, how are you?
Pretty good. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
Great. So let's just sort of start here. Most people in the position that you're in, author, thought leader, speaker, advisor, well recognized, didn't have a deliberate plan that said, this is how I will accomplish this, right? If you want to be an accountant, you take math classes, you take accounting classes, you get a CPA. So there is no specific and deliberate path.
No,
What was your path? How did you get here?
that's a pretty broad question, right? Pretty big. I think, I just always did things I'm passionate about. And I happen to be very passionate about companies, institutions, and kind of went into that. So I did a PhD on business models, and I had a great
Okay.
opportunity to work with Yves Pigneur. And that's how it all started out. I just wanted to understand, how do companies work? Like, why are they the way they are? And business models seemed like a great topic. So Yves was looking for somebody on that topic. That's how it started out. And then, we put stuff out there all the time, shared and shared. And it was the beginning of blogs and SlideShare. And
Hmm.
people seemed to like it. So because of those signals, I started to do more.
Sure.
I started to talk in places. And so it kind of just all emerged. But, I guess,
Well, let me ask you, when you say people started to like it, I want to push on that
yeah.
because I doubt it was stay-at-home moms in Idaho. Like, what are the patterns that you see based
Yeah.
on the types of people that the
Yeah.
content resonates with?
So at the very beginning, it was people downloading my blog, and that was like other people researching, doctoral students, professors, researchers,
Hmm.
but then also business people. So that was surprising. A PhD is not written to be read; it's to get a
Ever,
PhD.
ever.
So people started to read it. So that was an interesting sign. Then I packaged it into slides. And then, it kind of started out in the startup world. And that's what we targeted first when we did the research on business models. We really took the startup world pretty quickly and started being incubators, accelerators, et cetera.
Sure.
And then it spread to large companies. So now is everywhere. The business model canvas, the tools we do, our thinking. It started out first in startups,
Hmm.
first at the periphery. So my very first speaking gig was in Colombia. And when I got there, I didn't really know much about Colombia, and I
Sure.
still had the old school reputation. Oh, it's a dangerous country. The drug
Yeah.
cartels were there. It already changed a lot. It's actually a fabulous country. But that's where I got
Hmm.
my first paid speaking gig, and that's how things emerged. So first at the periphery. When I say periphery, I mean not the core. Where you think management thinking, United States, etc. So it was really in different places, and then it got just more and more traction, just like a product will get more and more traction around the world.
So then, talk for a little bit about, there's a testing mentality there, right? You throw a bunch of stuff out, see not only what sticks, but to whom it sticks, right? And then obviously the startup community is important relative to business models, right? So that would sort of be logical. And then there are some markets that I think it's leaked into that probably wouldn't have been ones that you might have picked,
Oh, for
right? And
sure.
sometimes it's as important to have some assumptions on the front end as it is to really assume that your assumptions are useless and the market will
Right.
will guide you to some degree.
Right.
So I want to talk for a moment about sort of the product path, right? So a lot of people in your position struggle with, okay, so I have a book and that's 20, $25, and I put a lot of effort in to sell a lot of those, even though the return, direct dollar return for energy out is nominal, right? It's sort of a silly business model. Then you've got speaking at some, multiple of thousands of the book. And then there's all the other stuff. How did you start to figure out, it was sort of ironic to ask the business model guy the business model question, but how did you, besides reading your book, obviously, and getting all the answers, but how did you figure out sort of what the right productization path is for the subsequent markets that you're serving?
So at the beginning, it was actually almost the other way around. I had to
Okay.
figure out how could I finance this book. So I wanted to write a book on this topic because I saw, these signals coming back from the market, from Slide
Yes.
and blog. So I asked myself, how can I finance the book project? Because we went for a visual book
Yeah.
landscape, very expensive to make and to print, something like $500,000. And I didn't have that money back then because I was a PhD student, worked for an NGO, etc. So we asked ourselves, what's an interesting business model that we could create to publish the book? So we did Kickstarter before Kickstarter. We asked
Okay.
people to pay us to help us write the book. And we put it back then, Ning was just starting out.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we put it out there on Ning and said, hey, you can buy access to this book. We're going to write it. We're going to share while we're making the book. So we pre-sold to, what was it, 470 people. First it was $25. And then at the end, we just raised the price all the time. It was 470. And when it was finished, we closed the Ning platform. People had their name in the book, but we started to resell. And, I remember it was actually a pretty scary moment because already then I was married, had one child at the time.
Sure.
I had huge bills to pay design, to pay the printer,
Yeah.
and was betting on the pre-sales coming in. So it was a bit of a risky entrepreneurial path, but then it worked out and the book turned out to be a bestseller. But you can't know. And if I look back now, it was a really ridiculous bet because most books, they don't sell more than 1,000 copies. We already went 50,000, which was very, arrogant to a certain extent to say our book is going to sell 50,000. And now we're over the millions, right? But so that's kind of the story at the beginning. That's how we financed the book.
Okay.
And once the
So first off, I would say that a couple of things on there is one is if you haven't been online in the last 10 years, Google Ning, because that's gone. That's interesting, right? But like you said, it's sort of the precursor to Kickstarter. I would argue that, because the book was so different in its visual and its appeal and all that,
yeah,
it may or may not be a fair comparable to compare it to a typical business book, 240 pages, 60,000 words, blah, 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 whatever. There's something about your book that when you get it and open it up, there is this visceral, wow, my brain reacts in a different way. And I think that's sort of part of the beauty of your work is it's not, it was sort of ironic for a PhD. It's not going to be this big, heavy, clunky academic piece. So bringing the visual, and there are others that have done beautiful things visually, Dan Rome.
Dan Rome was a huge inspiration. So before we created our book, my book budget was exploding because I was buying all these visual books. There were not that many. I bought a lot of architecture books, bought a lot of art books. Those were the inspiration for business model generation, because Eve and I wanted to write a book that we would love to buy. And that was visual and practical. And that didn't really exist. There were some visual business books, Dan Rome goes in that category, but not too many. So that was clearly the inspiration to do something. We didn't want to do it differently so it's different. We just thought it's the right format. Landscape is how we present our ideas. It doesn't make sense, and then you could say, oh, well, they're consultants and they put it on. No, we weren't consultants. We just knew our ideas fit on the slide format, which is landscape.
Yeah. Right.
With text around it. And
the other way.
We write books differently. So we don't write actually books. We craft them because every spread, a spread is a double page.
Yes.
One concept.
Yep.
We never have text overflowing from one spread to the next.
So there's succinct concepts that live on those two pages. Right. So you sort of redesigned this sort of user experience, if you will, of a book, which is typically linear and great. So, but let's go back to what I was asking. So then you've got the book, which in your case is a totally different model, experience, and outcome, which is pretty cool. But how right now? Tell me how I can choose to give you money from a business perspective. Like, hire you to speak. I can just email it to you, right? I can Venmo.
I'll take it, right? It's a funny story where I actually took money from somebody and I should have given it back and I forgot and I didn't have his email address. But this is a different one. So when we had the book, it started to be very successful. The question is, what do? You can do training, you can do consulting. I was not so interested in that because I had a consulting firm before with a friend. We built that up and we realized it's not our thing. And with Alan, my co-founder then, who was the designer of the first book, Business Model Generation, said, well, software could be cool. So we decided to go into software. Like, again, completely naive, just as naive as writing a visual book when nobody wants, publishers don't want visual books.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. So the common thread here is the naiver you are, the more successful you will be? Is that?
So, to a certain extent, I think you're right. And that's what entrepreneurship is about. If you know that things are impossible and you're pragmatic and realistic, you're not going to do them.
Sure.
Just back quickly, and then I'll get to the answer to the question. Yeah. I asked the public, so we self-published, okay, and got prepaid, etc. Put it out there, used fulfillment by Amazon. But when we sold the rights to Wiley, our publisher today, I asked them, Richard, who published Business Model Generation, I asked him, would you have ever published a 4-color landscape book? And he said, no
Never.
chance, you did everything wrong.
Right.
And that's the thing, right? So we didn't care what was
well, right. Not only wouldn't he have published it, it wouldn't have even made it to the pitch meeting with the other editors to say, up for consideration is a guy we've never heard of asking us to spend 30 times the money.
Exactly.
No words. Like, he would have looked like a horse's ass even bringing that to the meeting, because everyone in that meeting has a certain expectation of this is what a book is. Right?
Exactly. And that's where you need to be naive. So with Eve, we never even asked, okay, how are the other books that we need to, do we need to make? No, we just said, what's the kind of book we want to create? What's the right format? What would we buy? But it's still mass marketable. So we never forgot the audience. Mm-hmm. It was a book for us, but we knew there are more people like us out there. And we had the evidence. Here's the thing. You can be naive and delusional, but you can be naive and listen to weak signals. So because we did pre-sales, we had very strong signals. People were giving us money for the book. And so we knew there was something there. So I do think that naivete accompanied with good listening to the signals allows you to adapt all the time. And I like to say ideas don't matter, with books. And a book idea doesn't matter per se. You need to adapt it to what the audience should actually have, right? Fine.
No, and I like what you say, because what I've seen masking as naivete is doing the opposite for the sake of doing the opposite. So I've seen more than one author say, oh, no one's ever published a business book in purple, so I'll do it in purple. Yeah. And no one's ever, just sort of silliness, if you will. And sometimes that might shake up the mind and get a split second of attention. Yeah. But, if every business book is blue and yours is purple, okay, that's interesting. But if that's the best you got, and it could be purple, could be orange, whatever, it's,
Doesn't work. So I think differentiation always needs to be to better solve a particular customer job. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I like to use this jobs to be done concept by Christensen. And that's, I think, what we did with the book that was different. We designed a book that we thought was the right thing. And I'm not saying this is the only type of book. It's just the right type of book for a certain type of book.
So you're monetizing it through the book. And because you self-published, I want to just be clear here, you are actually monetizing the book, because most people that publish in a traditional publishing house, even when they say they're monetizing it, it's lowercase m, right? But you actually have real margins on the book, based on the fact that you self-published and you took the risk and made the investment. Then you've got speaking, right? You get paid to speak. We all know what that business looks like. Tell me about the software, because people do video-based training, people do apps, people do whatever, but how do you then take the ideas that live in your head, live in the book, live in the speak, put it into a piece of technology and say, go at it?
So the type of books that we make, because now we're on our 4th and we have a 5th one that we're co-authoring, there's always a tool at the center, a visual conceptual tool. Business Model Canvas was the first one, then Value Proposition Canvas. In the next one, the Invincible Company, it's the portfolio map. Originally, back to the PhD and why the software, in my PhD, I wrote about business models, but a rigorous model so we could build software on top. So the original idea was that you can do computer-aided design for business. Okay, like an architect.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah, like an architect makes buildings or an engineer makes a bridge. Why can't we do that for strategy and innovation? That was the goal. And then we started that with the iPad app. So with Alan, we designed an iPad app and we sold, a couple of 100,000 copies for $30. That was the monetization of the business model canvas, some of the content from the book into an app. And we knew that's not going to be the business, but we did that as an experiment to see if there's a market demand. The next phase was
Mm-hmm.
to say, what if we put the $30 app onto the web and we asked for $300? Because you can't
Sure.
ask for $300 in an app, right? It doesn't,
Right.
even if you create exactly the same value, it's in context and pricing. So we went to the software.
Well, and you're also giving, Apple or whoever 30, 40 cents on the dollar. And,
And you're
and, and then
looking
people are going to look at the comparables of a health app for $2.99 and think you're crazy.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
the context, right? So we went to the web app and we started selling that, and we made all the mistakes you can make in software because, again,
Sure.
naive. When you're naive, you'll make the mistakes, but if you're smart enough, you make calculated bets, you can always kind of save yourself. But then what we realized is the market is not that big yet. Still believe the market is there, and that's what we're growing towards now. But we realized there's also a market for online training. So we started
Yes.
packaging our stuff, but again, our own style. So it's not just talking heads. I'm not just on a screen talking. It's really packaged, with slides and voiceover and a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of filming to make it extremely visual, extremely simple,
Mm-hmm.
extremely practical. So we started having clients like MasterCard, who
Mm-hmm.
scaled this to a large part of their company. So we always listen to those signals. And now, we are kind of back to consulting a little bit because we do help large established companies with growth and transformation. But again, we do it our own kind of way. So this last
Mm-hmm.
thing, just we say, no, consulting is throwing people at a problem. We believe we throw tools, processes, and coaches at a problem. So we have
Sure.
technology-enabled services where you replace the human where it makes sense, and you use really good coaches where coaches make sense. So we
Mm-hmm.
can deliver 10 times better for 10 times less because we use tools coming
But
from.
but I want to go back on the consulting piece because I like that your consulting is not traditional, throw bodies at the problem, because that's what most people have a methodology. You train up smart people in the methodology, magic happens, et cetera, right? Talk about the price point you're able to command for the consulting today versus the consulting business you were in before you're a best-selling author, before you're a top speaker, before, right? And the scale and scope of the problems that you're working on. I think I know the answer to this, but I'll
So,
give you
I
a
mean,
softball.
there's two aspects. One is me as a speaker and as a workshop facilitator. Here's an interesting approach that might be interesting for people who are listening. With more book sales, I just always increase the price. And my simple thing was when everybody says no, I'm too expensive. When everybody says yes, I'm too cheap. And that was
Exactly.
kind of my radar. So it just went up and up and up. And I don't like speaking publicly about my speaking rates, but I think they're crazy in the sense that at the same time, I know the value I bring to a company. They make
Sure.
millions of dollars when I do these things. So that went up a lot. On the more consulting end where we have teams using
Mm-hmm.
technology enabled services, we went from smaller deals around $30,000-$40,000 to $300,000 to millions. And that's
So
just
10x and then more, 10 to 20x.
exactly. And it's the same, it's always this thinking that drives us is we had a $30 book. Then we went to the $30 app and we said, okay, an app doesn't really, it's not enough. You can't build a business around transactional.
Yep.
What if we
Yep.
went to a $300 recurring revenue?
Yep.
Okay, that's not enough. We need to, target the decision makers. How do we do that? So the book content we make and the software and the training always go hand in hand. So it's almost like you
Well,
have.
and they all have the same DNA. It's not like there's stuff that you omitted from the book and said you have to pay me more money to get the rest. It all lives in the book. It all lives in the app. And there's different markets. So I always say, listen, the same idea could be worth $1 or $1 million depending on the context and the market and whatever. And it doesn't mean that the $1 million one is wiser, more refined, whatever. It's typically the context that the content is deployed in that determines compensation. Yeah.
And this is the way I would look at it is what's the business model you want to design around your book? So if you write a book, there are different
Sure.
business models. I have nothing against that. Write a book and do the speaking or write a book and do the consulting.
Sure.
You don't have to manage people, right? And that's great.
Kind of nice.
Authors like Marshall Goldsmith, #1, coach in the world, he said, I don't want to build a business. So he remained a speaker and he had businesses that were managed by others. I
And
wanted to
licensing,
do both.
right? So
Yeah,
he repurposes the content. Yeah.
exactly. I wanted to do both because I'm fascinated about
Sure.
businesses and building them, and I wanted to apply the stuff we teach because I do believe you get a different kind of view of it when you do.
Sure.
So that was
And I
always.
would also say the more you're getting data from the app that could feed more content, you're getting anecdotal and evidence-based stories from the consulting that feeds a content engine. So ultimately there is this interconnected flywheel effect from a supply and demand and content creation and all that becomes pretty slick.
And we wouldn't write what we write today, and I think it's practical stuff. We wouldn't know if we hadn't always tried to improve. So for me,
Exactly.
the team, the goal is how can we get a little bit better every day? And as long as established companies are not good at growth and transformation, so they're not able to reinvent themselves, we take it as a personal defeat. We're doing something wrong. So we don't
Sure.
say
Sure.
they're stupid, they don't get it. We say, no,
Yeah.
we're still doing something wrong. And that's how the books and the tools, they always get better. They're all integrated, but we always see, oh, there's a missing piece. We need to talk about portfolio management. Oh, there's a missing
Yep.
piece. We'll talk
Yep.
about innovation culture.
Yep.
So we expand and keep it integrated and always get a little bit better because we're trying a little bit more. So we remain naive and try to say, okay, can we help companies design culture? Well, it turns out you can, right? But we had to kind of work ourselves towards that. And we build a business model around that. So I think for authors and thinkers, keeping the business model in mind that works for you is always the most important. Maybe so you want to build a company,
Yep.
maybe you want to build a one-person firm. Both is fine. It's a choice, right?
Sure. Well, on that note, we're a bit out of time here. So I want to thank you for all that you've shared with us today. Great stuff, and obviously phenomenal story. But I wish you the best on the next books, and keep the naivete. I mean, eventually you run out of naivete, and you may know everything about everything.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thanks for coming on. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.